Let's dive into this Harris basket concept.
Okay, the Harris basket. So this basket is essentially a group of companies, right,
Okay.
that are predicted to benefit from Harris's policies if she's elected.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of like, taking a peek into the future of the market, right? Driven by potential policy changes.
That makes sense. So, like,
Absolutely.
what kinds of companies are we talking about here? Give me some examples.
All right, so some are pretty intuitive, right? You've got your home builders like D.R. Horton.
Okay.
Her focus on affordable housing, especially those proposed subsidies for first-time home buyers, that could really boost their bottom line.
Interesting.
Yeah. Then there's the renewable energy sector with companies like NextEra Energy,
Okay.
her commitment to the Paris Agreement, and those aggressive clean energy goals. I mean, that signals good news for them.
Makes sense.
Right. And of course, healthcare is a big one,
Yeah.
especially companies focused on women's health, like Organon.
Right. Makes sense with her focus on women's rights.
Exactly.
Exactly. So this all sounds really promising, but are there any potential downsides or risks associated with these sectors, even if Harris wins?
That's a great question. And that's where things get a little more interesting,
Yeah.
Because, for example, while D.R. Horton might benefit from those subsidies, her plan to increase regulations on construction materials to promote environmentally friendly building could also increase their costs.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Right,
Oh.
right. It's a delicate balance.
Makes sense.
And with renewables, while the overall trend is positive, individual companies might face, specific challenges.
Okay.
For example, if Harris pushes for a rapid phase out of fossil fuels,
Right.
companies like NextEra, who still have some investments in natural gas, might need to adjust quickly.
Yeah.
And even in healthcare, success isn't guaranteed. Organon, for instance, relies heavily on international markets.
Hmm.
Global political shifts, changes in healthcare regulations abroad, those could impact their growth, regardless of what happens in the U.S.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Yeah.
It's all interconnected, right?
Yeah, so it's not just about assuming, like, everything will be rosy if Harris wins.
Right.
There are a lot of moving parts. Okay, let's dig into some of Harris's specific policy positions and see how they might ripple through the market.
Let's do it.
Let's start with healthcare. Obviously, one of her key focus areas.
Yeah, for her.
She's been very vocal about lowering healthcare costs, especially prescription drug prices.
Right.
Her plan to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices directly, I mean, that could significantly impact, pharmaceutical giants
Oh, yeah.
like Eli Lilly, Merck, and Pfizer.
Big time.
They could see their profit margins shrink if they're forced to lower prices.
For sure.
So potentially, like, bad news for big pharma. But what about other players in the healthcare sector?
Well, I mean, on the flip side, you've got insurers like Humana and UnitedHealth Group.
Right.
They might benefit
Okay.
if more people have access to affordable coverage.
Yeah.
It could lead to an increase in enrollment
Right.
and potentially higher profits for insurance companies.
Interesting.
And then, there are companies like Centene and Molina whose focus is on government-sponsored programs like Obamacare and Medicaid.
Yeah.
They could see a real boom under a Harris administration.
Really?
Oh, for sure.
It's fascinating to see how one policy change can have such diverse impacts on different parts of the same industry, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to corporate taxes.
Okay, taxes.
Harris has proposed raising the corporate tax rate to 28%.
You jump.
It's a significant jump from the current rate.
Yeah.
How might that play out?
Well, this proposal has stirred up a lot of debate,
Yeah, I bet.
Biggest concern is its potential impact on corporate profits, especially for those tech giants, right? Like Microsoft, Apple, and Alphabet, who are already paying a large chunk of taxes.
Right.
Some experts believe, this tax hike, combined with other potential policies from a Democratic-controlled government, could, spook the market
Right.
and lead to a decline in stock prices.
That's interesting. So a blue wave where Democrats control both the presidency and Congress, not necessarily be a good thing for the market.
Not necessarily, no. There's also the argument that a divided Congress, with Republicans holding some power, might actually be better for the market,
How so?
Well, it could act as a check on spending and prevent drastic policy changes that could create uncertainty and volatility.
Oh, okay. So it's not as simple as saying, like, one party's good for the market and the other's bad.
Right, exactly.
It's about the specific policies and the overall political climate.
It's nuanced,
Yeah. Okay, let's shift gears to renewable energy.
Okay, renewable energy.
This is an area where Harris has shown really strong support, like even going beyond what President Biden has proposed.
Absolutely. And it's not just about, symbolic gestures either.
Right.
Her proposed investments in renewable energy infrastructure, her focus on transitioning away from fossil fuels,
Yeah.
I mean, that could create enormous opportunities for companies in this sector. We've already talked about NextEra Energy, but they're not the only ones to watch.
Right. Who else?
Keep an eye on hydrogen producers like Plug Power and Bloom Energy.
Interesting.
They're still relatively small, but they could see explosive growth if Harris's policies create a favorable environment for hydrogen technology.
So for investors who are like bullish on the future of clean energy, a Harris presidency could be a very exciting time.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But remember, it's a long game.
Right.
These transitions take time, and there will be bumps along the way.
Yeah, of course.
It's important to do your research, understand the specific risks and opportunities associated with each company.
All right, let's talk housing.
Okay,
We've
housing.
already touched on how Harris's affordable housing plan could impact home builders like D.R. Horton, but what about the broader real estate market?
Well, her plans go beyond just, building new homes.
Yeah.
She's also proposed policies aimed at making home ownership more accessible, like expanding down payment assistance programs, strengthening fair lending laws. These measures could increase demand for homes, potentially leading to higher prices and increased profits for real estate companies, particularly those focused on affordable housing.
It sounds like she's aiming for like a multi-pronged approach to address the housing crisis.
It does seem that way.
It'll be interesting to see how these policies play out in the real world and how the market reacts.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, before we get into some specific stock picks,
Okay.
let's address that intriguing statistic you mentioned earlier.
Oh, yeah.
The stock market historically performing better under Democratic presidents.
Right.
Why might that be?
It's complex, there's no single explanation.
Right.
But some economists argue that Democratic policies, with their focus on social programs, government investment in infrastructure and education, tend to create a more stable and predictable economic environment.
Okay.
This can lead to, increased consumer confidence, which drives spending, boosts corporate profits,
Right.
ultimately leading to a stronger stock market.
So it's not just about tax cuts for the wealthy, as some might argue.
Right.
It's about creating a broader economic ecosystem that benefits, a wider range of people.
Exactly.
And that approach historically seems to have translated into a more robust stock market.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's definitely something to consider, especially when we're looking at potential market reactions to a Harris presidency. But, history doesn't always repeat itself.
Of course.
And there are countless other factors that could influence the market's performance.
For sure.
Okay, one more big topic before we move on to specific companies. China?
Okay, China?
It's been a major point of tension in recent years.
Definitely.
How might a Harris administration approach China, and how could that impact the market?
Well, it's unlikely that we'll see a complete reversal of the current administration's policies, right?
Right.
However, many analysts predict a potential shift towards a less adversarial approach under Harris.
Okay.
This could lead to a relief rally, they call it, in both Chinese stocks and U.S. companies with significant ties to China.
So for investors looking for opportunities in the global market,
Yeah,
China could be an interesting area to watch closely.
absolutely. But it's important to remember that the relationship between the U.S. and China is complex. It's multifaceted.
It's a lot of layers.
A lot of layers, yeah. Any shift in policy will likely have both positive and negative consequences.
Right.
And investors need to be prepared for potential volatility.
It's a reminder that investing is about understanding not just the companies themselves,
Right.
but also the broader political and economic landscape,
Yeah,
which they operate.
the big picture.
Yeah, the big picture. Okay, I think we've laid a solid foundation for understanding the potential market impacts of a Harris presidency.
Yeah, we've covered all.
We've explored her key policy positions, analyzed historical trends, and even considered the global implications.
We've done the work.
We have. But now, let's get to the fun part. Specific companies that could see significant gains if Harris wins.
All right, let's do it. We've got a diverse group of companies to discuss, each with its own unique story and potential for growth.
All right, let's jump in.
Okay, let's start with Organon, the global healthcare company specializing in women's health.
Oh, yeah, Organon.
Yeah, they've got a market cap of around $4.6 billion,
Okay.
makes them a significant player in the pharmaceutical world.
Yeah, for sure. And given, Harris's focus on women's health and reproductive rights, they seem perfectly positioned to benefit from our policies. It
Exactly.
seems like a no-brainer.
And what's interesting is they're not just reliant on the U.S. market.
Oh, really?
77% of their revenue comes from outside the U.S.
Wow. Okay.
So they've got that buffer, right,
Yeah.
against any domestic political turbulence.
So even if things get rocky here, they've got a solid global presence
Yeah.
to fall back on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and their recent performance seems to back this up.
Oh, yeah.
Their second quarter numbers were strong, especially for their key product, Nexplanon. That's a long-acting contraceptive implant. Okay. They saw a 13% year-over-year growth in revenue for that product alone.
That's impressive.
It is.
It seems like they're tapping into a real need, and with potential policy shifts under Harris, that demand could, surge even further.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, let's switch gears to Sterling Infrastructure. Those 120% returns over the past year are eye-popping.
They are, yeah.
What's fueling that kind of growth?
Well, they've made some smart moves,
Okay.
Back in 2016, they decided to diversify, branching out from traditional heavy construction projects into more specialized infrastructure work.
Like what?
Think data centers, those massive warehouses for e-commerce companies,
Yep.
even residential and commercial concrete foundations, things that are in high demand as the economy evolves.
So instead of just building roads and bridges, they're focusing on the infrastructure of the future.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
And it's paid off. Their second quarter results were stellar.
Oh, wow.
12% year-over-year increase in revenue. And even more impressive, an 18% increase in their
EBITDA.
Yeah, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, basically. It means their core profitability is very healthy.
Okay, so those are some serious gains.
They are.
It makes you wonder if this is like a sign of things to come for other infrastructure companies, especially with all the talk about increased government spending in this area.
It's certainly possible, and with the bipartisan infrastructure law already in place,
Right.
there's a lot of money flowing into these types of projects. Sterling infrastructure might just be the tip of the iceberg.
Interesting. All right, let's talk electric vehicles.
Okay, EVs.
Rivian Automotive is generating a lot of buzz these days.
They are, yeah.
And for good reason. They're producing some seriously cool electric trucks and SUVs.
They are, yeah.
And they've got the backing of Amazon, no less.
They do, and they're also riding the wave of government support for the EV industry, both at the state and federal level.
Right.
California, Harris's home state, is a leader in EV adoption, and the Biden administration has been pushing hard for policies to incentivize, EV production and sales.
So they've got a lot of tailwinds pushing them forward.
Yeah.
But you mentioned earlier that they're facing some headwinds as well.
Right.
What are those, and how might they impact their future?
Well, like any young company, they're still figuring things out. Production challenges, supply chain issues, managing their cash flow.
Right.
Those are all hurdles they need to overcome.
Makes sense.
Plus, the EV market is getting increasingly competitive.
Oh, of course.
You've got those established automakers like Ford and GM entering the game.
Right.
So it's not a guaranteed slam dunk,
But the potential is definitely there.
Oh, yeah.
Most analysts seem to agree, giving Rivian a buy or strong buy rating, even with the challenges, it seems like they're betting on the long game.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a classic high-risk, high-reward scenario. For investors who are comfortable with a bit of volatility, Rivian could be an exciting addition to their portfolio, but as always, do your research, understand the risks involved.
Solid advice. Okay, let's move on to a company that's a bit more established, NextEra Energy.
Okay, NextEra.
They're a giant in the utility sector, and they've been quietly building a clean energy empire.
They have, and it's positioned them incredibly well for the future,
Oh, so?
They're the world's largest producer of wind and solar energy.
Wow, really?
And they're investing heavily in battery storage, green hydrogen, all those cutting-edge technologies that are essential for, a clean energy future.
So they're not just riding the wave, they're helping to create it.
They are. They are.
And with Harris's strong commitment to clean energy, NextEra Energy seems like a pretty safe bet.
Their stock performance this year certainly suggests that investors are bullish on their prospects. They've outperformed the broader market by a healthy margin, and they also offer a decent dividend yield, which makes them attractive to, income-seeking investors.
They seem like they've got all the bases covered.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, let's talk tech. Microsoft is a company that needs no introduction.
Oh, yeah. Everybody knows Microsoft.
They're a global behemoth, and they're leading the charge in the AI revolution.
And they're not just focused on the technology itself, they're
Right.
actively engaged in discussions about AI regulation,
Oh, okay.
working with policymakers to ensure that AI is developed and deployed responsibly.
That's smart.
Yeah, they're not just trying to build the coolest AI, they're thinking about the ethical and societal implications.
Right.
And with Harris's interest in AI governance, Microsoft could be a key player in shaping the future of this field.
Interesting.
Their cloud and AI businesses are already generating massive revenue,
I bet.
and that growth is only expected to accelerate in the coming years. Microsoft is a company that's constantly evolving, and they seem to have a knack for capitalizing on emerging trends.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Yeah.
Okay, let's bring it back to housing with D.R. Horton.
Okay, back to housing.
We've talked about their affordable housing focus, but
Mm.
what else makes them stand out as a potential winner under a Harris administration?
Well, they're not just building houses, they're building communities. They
Uh-huh.
focus on creating desirable neighborhoods,
Right.
with amenities and features that appeal to a wide range of home buyers.
Yeah, makes sense.
And they've got a strong track record of profitability and dividend payouts,
Okay.
which makes them attractive to, a broad investor base.
Plus, their size gives them a real edge.
It does.
They operate in over 120 markets across 33 states,
Wow.
which allows them to diversify their risk and capitalize on growth opportunities wherever they rise.
Exactly. They're not putting all their eggs in one basket,
Right.
which is always a good strategy for long-term success.
All right, two more picks to round out our basket.
Okay, let's do it.
First up, Brookfield Renewable, a global leader in clean energy that seems perfectly aligned with Harris's vision for a more sustainable future.
They own a diverse portfolio of hydroelectric, wind, and solar assets all over the world,
Okay.
which gives them a very stable and reliable revenue stream.
So they're not just sticking with what they know.
Right. No, they're investing heavily in new technologies like battery storage and green hydrogen,
Okay.
which are essential for making renewable energy more efficient and reliable.
So they're not just providing clean energy today, they're building the infrastructure for a cleaner energy future.
They are.
Yeah.
Smart move.
And their dividend yield is pretty attractive too,
Right.
which makes them a good option for income-seeking investors who also want to align their investments with their values.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, last but not least, we have UnitedHealth Group, the largest health insurer in the U.S.
Oh, yeah. They're a complex company, but are also a dominant force in the healthcare industry.
And with Harris's focus on expanding access to affordable health care, UnitedHealth Group could see significant growth in their government-sponsored programs like Medicare and Medicaid.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
They're also investing heavily in technology and data analytics,
Right.
which could help them improve efficiency and lower costs,
For sure.
ultimately benefiting, both their customers and their shareholders.
It's a reminder that even in a highly regulated industry like healthcare, there's room for innovation and growth.
Yeah, that's true.
And UnitedHealth Group seems determined to be at the forefront of that change.
So there you have it, a diverse basket of stocks that could potentially benefit from a Harris presidency. But as we've discussed,
Right.
there are always risks and uncertainties.
Exactly. It's crucial to do your own research, consider your risk tolerance, and make investment decisions that align with your financial goals and values. Don't just blindly follow the crowd.
Solid advice. Okay, before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the historical trend of the stock market performing better under Democratic presidents.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about potential explanations like increased government spending and greater consumer confidence, but is there anything else that might be contributing to this pattern?
Well, some analysts point to the fact that, Democratic administrations tend to be more focused on regulation,
Okay.
particularly in areas like finance and the environment.
Yeah.
And while some might see regulation as a hindrance to business,
Right.
it can actually create a more stable and predictable market environment,
Okay.
which can be attractive to investors.
So instead of fearing regulation, some investors might see it as like a sign of stability and a way to mitigate risk.
Exactly.
That's an interesting perspective.
And it's worth considering that, the stock market is not a monolithic entity.
Right. It's made up of lots of different pieces.
No, different sectors and industries can react differently to political events and economic policies.
So while the overall market might trend upwards under a Democratic president,
Right.
some sectors might perform better than others.
Exactly. It's all about understanding the nuances and doing your research to identify potential investment opportunities.
Okay, one last question. How might the rise of certain companies, particularly those in technology and renewable energy, shape the political landscape in the years to come?
That's a fascinating question.
It is.
And one that's difficult to answer definitively.
Yeah.
But I think we can safely say that these companies are wielding increasing influence,
Okay.
both economically and politically.
Yeah, for sure.
They're creating jobs, driving innovation, shaping the way we live, work, and interact with the world.
And as their power grows,
Right.
so too does their ability to influence policy decisions, campaign contributions, and public opinion. It's a reminder that the relationship between business and politics is constantly evolving,
Yeah,
and it's one that we need to pay close attention to.
for sure.
Absolutely. And as informed citizens and investors, it's our responsibility to understand the dynamics at play and make our voices heard.
Yeah. Right.
Well said. Okay, before we get too philosophical, let's wrap things up with a quick recap of those specific stock picks we discussed.
Okay, let's do it.
We've got Organon, a global healthcare company focused on women's health.
Sterling Infrastructure, an infrastructure solutions company that's riding the wave of growth in data centers, e-commerce, and residential construction.
Rivian Automotive, an American EV maker that's benefiting from government support and growing consumer demand for electric vehicles.
NextEra Energy, a utility giant that's leading the transition to clean energy.
Microsoft, a tech behemoth that's at the forefront of the AI revolution.
D.R. Horton, a leading home builder that's poised to benefit from the ongoing housing shortage, and Harris's focus on affordable housing.
Brookfield Renewable, a global leader in clean energy with a diverse portfolio of hydroelectric, wind, and solar assets.
And UnitedHealth Group, the largest health insurer in the U.S., which could see significant growth in its government-sponsored programs under a Harris administration.
So there you have it, a diverse basket of stocks that could potentially benefit from a Harris presidency.